You know how ballet dancers are like,
Never.
try not to get dizzy? But
Is that
yeah, you
like
just keep looking in one spot.
whiplash? Is that how they keep themselves from getting dizzy? No. You see, you're dizzy?
Yeah, I'm really dizzy now.
As you slowly turned around.
The bit wasn't worth it.
Welcome to Oddball. I'm Amin Elhassan. That right there is Charlotte Denise Wilder.
No,
No?
not my name.
Okay.
I don't have a middle name.
Her birth certificate lies,
We
apparently.
just went over that. How do you have my birth certificate?
Don't worry about it.
I'm very worried about
We
it.
got a wonderful show for you guys today. Look, we got another edition of Bold and Spicy. Also, the second half of our conversation with Russ Bengtson.
About sneakers. So this is my cool new vintage, well, my newly acquired vintage shirt of me.
There you go. Okay. I like it. It's pretty cool. I also like Russ's book, A History of Basketball in 15 Sneakers. We aired the first part of that conversation last week. Today we kind of had a bow on this, so you don't want to miss that. But first, Charlotte, let's get to what's in the news. And a couple of days ago, the NBA GM survey came out. They do this every year. John Schumann over at NBA.com, he talks to all the GMs. They fill out a survey, they answer a bunch of questions. Like some of them are generic kind of, who's going to win the title? Who's going to win the East? Who's going to win the West? Who's going to win MVP? Then other ones are a little bit more nuanced, like who's going to have a breakout year? Who would you start a franchise with? Who's the best person at each position and all that, right?
Yes. Do you think that GMs really fill this out with a lot of thought?
So I've talked about this before with regard to all-star voting, right?
Yeah.
Like the starters, the media players, and fans pick starters, but the backups are picked by the coaches, right?
Yes.
And for that purpose, I've seen it happen. I've seen when the email comes in, says, hey, don't forget to get your all-star reserves in. I know for a fact that the number of coaches who are literally sitting down, he's had a good year. They're not doing that.
Right.
Because a coach's life is, remember, this is in the middle of January, it's the middle of the season.
It's hectic.
They actually have real life pressing matters, right?
Right.
The GM survey, I think, is a little different because the nature of a GM's job is very big picture, long term, right? And so, yes, there are things that are pressing on a day-to-day, like needs to be done by today.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of their stuff is kind of like pitch it forwards, but especially this time of year.
Right. I was going to say before the season starts, they have time to actually sit with it maybe a little bit more.
Having said that, every year we get answers that indicate either some of these respondents are not taking it seriously in the sense of, I don't have time, just name some stuff, or they're not taking it seriously in the sense of like, I'm about to F all of this up just for shits and giggles.
Right. And I think we have evidence of some of that in this year's GM survey, in which they were asked which players most likely to have a breakout season in 2023, 2024. And I mean, do you know who was the top choice at 23%?
Wow. Maybe a rookie like Victor Wembanyama?
You might think. Mightn't you? But no, it is Anthony Edwards, Team USA's own NBA All-Star.
Right.
So I guess that leads me to be like, what is a breakout season? Is it when you can be like, that is the guy, the new face of the league? Because that's a pretty high bar.
Yeah, and at the same time, it can't be, I think he's going to be really good this year because he's already been an all-star and the best player on Team USA.
That's about as good as it gets.
Yeah, like you can't break outer than that other than winning MVP.
Yeah, you can't break outer than that.
Like the example of that, a breakout guy who broke out again or whatever, I would think about Steph Curry, like his second MVP year.
Right.
Like you just say, how much better could he be? And then it's like, no, like he actually had another level of greatness that none of us knew. So I guess you call that a breakout year, but again, he was the reigning MVP.
That should not be the criteria that we're going by for breakout year.
So another example. So some of this is the question is purposely vague. Shout out to John Schumann.
Yeah.
He's not leading anyone. It's like, you tell me. And so enough guys were like, I can't think of anyone. Well, Anthony Edwards is young, and that's it, right?
Right.
Another example of the question being vague, Charlotte, who's the best point guard in the NBA according to GMs?
Stephen Curry. Golden State, 63%.
Who's the best shooting guard in the NBA?
Number 1 is Devin Booker.
Who's number 2?
Stephen Curry.
Okay, so there you go. So there's a bunch of guys who voted Steph Curry's the best point guard. And then there's some guys that Steph Curry's not a point guard. He's a 2 guard. And then that's where their vote went, right? Unless there were people who voted for him as best point guard and best 2 guard. And we see this happen again with small forward and power forward, where Kevin Durant is second in both of those categories.
Which also, I mean, I feel like this speaks to some of the nature of the positionless basketball. But I feel like it's sort of funny when you have questions that should have, or that seem like they would have more defined answers or criteria, and then even GMs are like, I don't know.
Well, I mean, it highlights like how hard some of this stuff is, at the very least, or maybe they're just lazy, right?
Yeah, right.
But all of these pale in comparison to the answer to a question. Look, every year we get one of these, and that's why I say some of these are trolling. So I want to say 2-3 years ago, there was a GM who literally, at any opportunity he could, about new acquisitions, underrated acquisitions, one of the questions he used to ask was like, what's a loss that's going to hurt a team the most?
Yeah.
And this dude answered Tomasz Satoransky for all of that stuff.
Stop it.
And I'm like, how is this guy getting votes for the most underrated acquisition, the best acquisition, the biggest loss? Like, Tomasz Satoransky, by the way, Google him.
Yeah.
He's not in the league anymore. In that vein, Charlotte, one of the questions was, if you were starting a franchise today and could sign any player in the NBA.
Anybody.
Any player in the NBA, who would it be? Number 1 on the list was Nikola Jokic. Makes a whole lot of sense.
Yep.
These surveys are very often influenced by recent events.
I was going to say, little recency
bias is strong. He says, Jokic did this. Okay. Number 2, surprisingly, though not shockingly, is Victor Wembanyama at 23%.
Yeah, young, most promising rookie in 20 years. That was also a thing they voted on here.
And like, one of the things also is the idea that if I'm starting a franchise, I want a player who gives me the biggest longevity. Right. So you don't say LeBron because he's in his year 21 or 22. You want, or 21, year 21. You want someone who's going to, quote unquote, be around. So it's like, I get it. Number 3 is Giannis. Okay. Number 4 is Luka Doncic. Again, young, exciting, all-round player, whatever. Number 5 is Anthony Edwards. And that's above Steph Curry, above Joel Embiid, above Jason Tatum. Now,
I was about to say, do you think that's an age thing? And then you got to Jason Tatum.
Yeah, so I said it in terms of above those 3 players. But this question is an open-ended question for which people give an answer. So for Anthony Edwards to get 7% of the vote, 7% of 30 votes, we're assuming every GM participated, right?
Yeah.
So that's about 2 GMs there, right? Said Anthony Edwards. That was their answer.
Would that be...
So the 2 GMs went and said, hey, do you want Giannis or Anthony Edwards? Oh, give me Anthony Edwards. Hey, do you want Nikola Jokic or Anthony Edwards? No. Give me Anthony Edwards. Really? Like, I love the dude. I think he's fun. I think he's funny. I think he's exciting. I think he plays hard. He's shown himself to be a playoff competitor. Ain't no freaking way in the world you give me the chance to pick any player.
Well, it flies in the face of, like, who is the greatest player or who will win next year's MVP. And it's Jokic, Giannis, Jason Tatum, Luka Doncic. So it's like, why wouldn't you want to start a franchise with any one of them?
2 of y'all are lying, basically. It doesn't make sense. Like, Are you being a hipster? Everyone probably said Giannis or Jokic. But, like, do I want a hipster running my team?
No.
I don't want you to show me how cool you are.
I'd like a shrewd businessman running my team.
There's no shame in, like, the obvious answer.
Right.
They made a whole razor about it.
Can I just tell you, before we move on to a slightly more sneakery subject, you probably knew this was coming, but my favorite answer to one of these questions was, what was the most underrated player acquisition? At number 1, my boy, Marcus Smart, Memphis, 17%. And I like that because it's underrated. They're like, who didn't get enough respect this offseason?
Everyone's going to say Damian Lillard.
Yeah,
let me tell you.
Marcus Smart does not get enough respect.
Another one of your guys is on that list. I think Grant Williams is
Yeah.
In the top 5, yeah.
My 2 guys.
Look, I think both of those guys are going to be huge helps to Memphis and Dallas. So, GM survey, a lot of fun. You know what else is fun?
What?
Talking about sneakers. And I know the news came out that Shaquille O'Neal's been named the president of basketball for Reebok, the Reebok brand. Allen Iverson is going to be involved as well in an official capacity. I believe it's the vice president, yeah.
Which, who knows what any of those, what that president, vice president.
The president of Reebok has told us he knows.
The CEO of Reebok. He said it is not a figurehead position.
Yeah, this is not a consultant.
No.
This is a guy who's showing up to work with a briefcase.
Yeah, every night that Shaq is on TNT, that morning he showed up to Reebok with his briefcase and he was ready to get down to business.
Like Clark Kent, right? But that's pretty interesting. You know what else is interesting?
What?
Our friend Russ Bengtson, right? Wrote a book, A History of Basketball, 15 Sneakers. We had a great conversation with him. The first half aired last week. If you missed it, it's on YouTube. Just go find it.
Go check it out.
Part 2 comes up next.
There was a brief moment of like, oh, the new Air Jordan. And now it's just like gone. You know, I went to a mall Foot Locker, and I noticed that all the new Lukas, like the Luka 2s, which are fairly recent, were like lined up at the bottom of the wall, like along the floor. It's like, those just came out. What are you doing? Like, don't you want to sell those?
What is it then? Is it the sneaker company informing the consumer, hey, this is important and this isn't? Or is it the consumer informing the companies, hey, we don't care about that new stuff, we want the retros?
I think it's a little of both. And to be honest with you, and like, I can say this, I think, because I'm 52, I think like people my age and even younger, like, don't want to lose their own cultural relevancy. So people like us, you know, push this old stuff because it's like, well, the sneakers that were cool when I was a kid have to still be cool, because if they're not, then maybe I'm not cool anymore, and God forbid. You know, and people kind of buy into that. And I think people like me and people around my age are working at those companies too, and like continuing to push those same things. And if I may make a third addition to that, you know, I think there was something about, let's say, the late 80s, when like Spike and Mike stuff first started. Shout out to Wyden and Kennedy and Spike Lee and Mike. And a lot of that advertising and the shoes and the athletes, so much less of it was fragmented. You know, there was like this, I don't know, alchemy going on where like the media, the broadcasts, the ads all combined to make these shoes into something bigger than they were. And the way the landscape is fragmented now, you can't really do that with new stuff. So all you can really do, if you're the company, is to continually recycle this old magic. And I just wonder like how long it's going to last. Kids, at least, do want new stuff. Kids want those mellows that look like a comic book, or the back of a cereal box, or whatever you want to compare it to.
I think you see that across industries, though. You see that with movies, like they're just going back to old IP or remaking
100%.
stuff, because there is no, you know, quote, monoculture, if that were ever really a thing. But everything's fragmented. And so I think across industries, people are like, well, it's so hard to break out like a new musical artist or this or that. And at some point, the nostalgia factor is going to run out, right? Like at some point, they're going to have to find a way for these new things to take off so that this generation has something to be nostalgic about.
Yeah, it has to. And, you know, I think you have like, the old stuff doesn't go away. You know, old stuff used to go away. Like even when I was a kid, like if you wanted to find an album by some band that wasn't their most recent one, you might not be able to find it. You know, stuff went out of print. Right. Sneakers obviously went away. They weren't going to retro them. You know, the example I use is like when, say, like the Air Jordan 8, which recently reissued, like when that came out, you might not have thought that was as good as the 3 or the 4 or the 5 or the 1, but you couldn't buy the 3, the 4, the 5, or the 1. You wanted the new Air Jordan, and the new Air Jordan was the 8. And whether you liked it or not, you bought it because, like, if you could afford it, because that was the new Air Jordan. You know, you weren't going to, like, there was no place to find the other ones. Now Jordan is like putting their new ones up against all their old ones, which they're still producing. Right. Like, what are you going to choose? You know, if you're a consumer, you kind of want to get the thing that you know everyone already likes. You know, you don't want to necessarily take that risk. But I think also if you're the brand, there's an incentive to produce the old thing because like so many of the costs are already covered. You don't have to design it. You don't have to market it. You basically just have to put it on the shelf and it's going to go. And whether it's an Air Jordan 3 or a Superman movie, like the same thing kind of applies. It's hard to figure like, you know, when was the last like really good like KD commercial? Like, are they going to do a commercial for Booker, you know, like, or Luka? You know, it's like you'd think one of these guys would have benefited from something like that and some kind of push.
I was just going to say, you get these pushes like Luka for the Lake Bleds to play a basketball game on Lake Bled. It feels like there's stunt marketing as opposed to maybe a coordinated cross-media campaign. And then Booker, which I would love to hear what you think about those shoes, but it is a very, it's a social media driven thing in a way that maybe, as we've seen at the Sabrinas, it could benefit from something a little more holistic.
Right. I mean, I think you could stand to have like a larger conversation about this stuff. You know, it is still a mass market product. It still does exist on the wall at the mall or like, you know, or online for that matter, you know, and you'd think these companies would really want to move some of their new stuff. I don't know. Another interesting thing to me is like, I feel like if you go back to the 80s and 90s, I think a lot of brands were doing more experimentation because I don't know if anyone really knew what worked. There was that and the fact that people wanted different things, you know, and I think we've reached a point with basketball shoes where it's like we're kind of nearing this basketball shoe singularity where like they know scientifically what the best thing is. Most people want the same thing. So it's like, if you're going to just make everyone a low top basketball shoe, why do we need like 20 different ones? You know, it's kind of weird to me to have a LeBron, bring back Kobe's, KD, Giannis, like all these guys are kind of very different, but they're all wearing very similar shoes. Like it's almost like a bulked up running shoe that can take moving in multiple directions. Which does bring me to the Booker, which to some degree, I'm not sure how I feel about it. Like, I think like if you're trying to appeal to people who like retro, they're just going to buy retro. Like you're kind of splitting the difference. And like, why would people even split that difference? But I do appreciate that they're doing something different and they're doing something that clearly appeals to like Devin's sense of style. Like, you know, it's like all we see with Devin is him wearing Chuck Taylors, him driving his 59 Chevy or his Grand National to games. Like Devin is clearly an old soul. So to do like this vintage style shoe like makes sense for him. I get it.
All right, his name is Russ Bengtson. His book is called A History of Basketball in 15 Sneakers. It's available wherever you get books, October 10th. Russ, thanks for joining us on Oddball.
Thanks so much for having me. Really appreciate it.
What are you doing?
No, they say that Metalog Media is so cheap they couldn't even afford floors. Well, who's laughing now? Look at all of this lavish floor space here I have. I don't have to sit up to do my damn work. I don't even have to stand up. I can lay down and play bold or spicy. Charlotte, are you ready?
Yeah, I have a chair.
No, chairs are bad for you. Scientifically proven.
Well.
Charlotte, the MVP this season will be a first-timer.
Maybe a four. I don't know. There have been so many repeats over the year. Jokic, Giannis, LeBron, obviously, and then there's Russ and Harden in there. But there are a bunch of guys who haven't been MVP who could be this year, like Dame, none of the Celtics.
I don't think Dame can be MVP.
Why? Because he's on a team with Giannis?
Yeah, that's the rule. The unofficial rules, like when you have multiple guys, none of them can win. It's what happened when Durant went to Golden State. Curry was a two-time MVP, a unanimous MVP, and as soon as you add Kevin Durant, you just don't get that love anymore. I think it's going to be either Jokic or Giannis. Oddly enough, I don't think Dame can win MVP. I think Giannis can, though.
Well, Huck, but you just said that they can't be. If both guys are there, one can't win.
Don't try to make sense of my.
All right, here's a spicy one for you. LeBron James doesn't retire as a Laker or a Cavalier. You look like you're wounded. You look like someone got you with a bow and arrow, and that's how you fell.
I'm very badly burned. I could see LeBron being like, you know what, I want to play with my son, and my son got drafted by like the Pistons, so guess what, I'm going to play in Detroit. Yeah, I'm going to knock that down 1.5 points and call it a 7 out of 10.
Okay. Well, I'm blanking on whether you can retire as a certain in basketball, the way in baseball you can sign a one-day contract to retire.
Oh, yeah. No, they can do that.
So that's why I feel like it's spicy. I feel like even if he went to the Pistons, he probably wouldn't.
Still come back and play for the Cavs for one day or whatever. I don't know.
Not the Heat, though. He wouldn't retire.
Why not?
I don't know. I just feel it.
Joel Embiid wants James Harden to stay in Philadelphia.
I don't think that's spicy.
Really?
I think that's a 3. I think he probably doesn't want the headache of James Harden, but he probably wants James Harden, when he is as good a player as he can be, to be there to help him win a championship, even though it didn't work last year.
I'm trying to do the 80s girl on her bed thing she's kicking up this thing.
Great job.
There you go. Okay.
Good work.
All right. I need a phone with a long cord so I can just like twirl it around.
All right.
I think that Joel Embiid doesn't care anymore because I heard from Susie in the lunchroom, who's dating Mick, who's friends with Derek, who's brothers with Michelle, that Joel Embiid's going to want out of Philadelphia anyway.
Oh. Wait. Really?
That's what I heard.
Oh my God. Does anybody else know that?
Like only the whole school. Where have you been, Wilder? Oh, hold on. I've got
I was at
someone on the
summer
other
camp.
line, and I don't have call waiting.
Okay,
Yeah.
I mean, Rudy Gay finally wins a title with the Warriors. How spicy is that take?
7 out of 10, for a couple reasons. Rudy Gay is on an Exhibit 9 contract. That means he's like gone to camp and is kind of make good. If he makes the team, his contract is non-guaranteed all the way up to January 10th. Mm-hmm. But if he doesn't make the team, they really don't owe him any money if he doesn't play if he's not on the roster once the regular season starts. So he's got an uphill battle a little bit in order to make the team. We know the Warriors need size, and they had some bigs come out and work out for them and said no. I don't know if they'd use their roster spot on Rudy Gay, who's a wing. Then, even if Rudy makes the team, I still have questions about Chris Paul and his fit. I saw Steve Kerr say they're going to run a lot more pick and roll. I don't know how you can be so singularly branded with a particular style of play for so long, and then one day just wake up and say, oh yeah, we're just going to throw that in the trash and run a bunch of pick and roll because we have this great pick and roll player.
Yeah, because we got one guy.
Yeah, so I love Rudy. I hope he makes the team. But even then, I don't know if the team is going to win a championship. So I'll give it a 7.
I have to tell you, I cannot wait. I cannot wait to see how the Chris Paul experiment works out. That is, that is one of my I'm most excited for that this season.
Well, okay then. All right. Charlotte, this one is spicy. The Heat won't even make the playoffs this year.
You think that's very spicy?
The Heat won't make the playoffs?
They were in the play-in tournament.
All right, Charlotte. So you give that a what?
I give that, they made it to the finals last year, so I give that a 5.5. Because they didn't really do much this offseason to, if they were in the play-in last year and they didn't get a million times better, maybe there's a chance they're in the play-in and they lose.
Wow. You heard it here first, Miami.
Someone's got to be not a Heat homer around here.
I'm sorry, are you accusing me?
No, I'm saying this general Dan Le Batard universe. Someone's got to.
All right, what's my last one?
Your last one is Ben Simmons will be an all-star this season.
10 out of 10. Get the fuck out of here. 10 out of 10. How about that?
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that's the level.
Wow, now I really hope he's an all-star and we can run this back.
You know what?
What?
I would be less surprised if Dennis Smith Jr. were an all-star than Ben Simmons.
Hey, well, that's been another edition of Bold and or Spicy.
That's the show for us today. Amin, you ever think about climbing Mount Everest?
That was grammatically awful.
Thanks.